Hold on, lost my window. There we go. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight for History Happy Hour, How Did We Can? My name is Marianne Sheeline. I serve as the Director of External Engagement at the Indiana Historical Society, and it's so great to have you all here this evening. I will be going over a few logistics before passing the mic over to our speakers. At the Indiana Historical Society, we are Indiana's storyteller, connecting people to the past. We collect paper-based items such as books, paintings, letters, photographs, diaries, maps, and more to tell Indiana's unique stories. We then find ways to share these stories through publications, exhibits, and events just like this. Through these documents, we tell the diverse stories of Indiana and inspire a future grounded in our state's uniting values and principles. Tonight, we're here for a conversation on memory, tradition, and the evolution of how we eat and preserve food, and centering completely around canning. But before I hand it over to our moderator, I have a few pieces of logistics to go over. For this event, Callie and LaDonna will talk for about 35 minutes, and then we'll open it up to your questions. If you have questions as we go along, please drop that into the Q&A section of your Zoom screen. We'll keep an eye on those and then pepper them in as we get to the second half of the program. If you would like to add anything to the chat box, don't forget to change your response to all panelists and attendees so that we can all see your thoughts. Keep an eye on the chat, and I'll be dropping in links and URLs throughout the conversation. And don't worry if you miss one, they'll be delivered to your inbox in a follow-up email tomorrow morning. This program is being recorded. You can catch the replay on our website, indianahistory.org, in the upcoming weeks. If you enjoy this program, please consider coming back for more. Our History Happy Hours continue August 19th with the history of women's professional baseball with our friends from the History Museum in South Bend and from the Indiana Historical Bureau. Stay tuned for upcoming happy hours on native beadwork, ghost stories, murder, and more. Sign up for all of these at indianahistory.org. And for more information about this and other virtual offerings coming to an internet-connected device near you. And with that, we will turn it over to Callie McCune, our Manager of Engagement at the Indiana Historical Society.
Thanks, Marianne. Hi, everyone, and welcome to History Happy Hour. I'm really excited to have you here and to talk about a topic that's near and dear to my heart, the history of canning. And with me tonight is someone that's probably, I'm a lifetime canner, but is someone that is more of a canner expert than me, LaDonna Garner. So LaDonna is a consultant focused on historical preservation and genealogical research within and beyond Southeastern Missouri. She lectures often on topics both at conferences and as an instructor for the continuing education program at St. Louis Community College. She is an active member of the Association of Professional Genealogists and is on their board of directors, and can often be found at the National Genealogical Society and a number of other organizations where she helps with conference planning, website design, and management. She's also a licensed veterinary technician with a devotion to heritage animals, and she's on this quite farm, out in Southeast Missouri. So I feel like we're going to learn a lot about her homestead as we get going. So welcome, LaDonna. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you everyone for coming in today and joining us to talk about canning. Because like I just told them, no one wants to talk about canning. So they might not think it's interesting, but I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it.
I mean, we should say that she did raise a canner, so her daughter has made off with some of her supplies that we were looking for earlier. So don't let that fool you. But we're here at History Happy Hour, so I always like to start out with, what are you drinking tonight? I have like a little lemonade concoction in a ball jar because I felt like being on brand tonight. I think the ball logo's on that side. There you are. Yeah.
Now, I have to still research this particular mug here that I have a ton of. It was one of those, it was kind of like a jelly jar, I think, where they put the caps on and you can drink out of it later instead of having the jar rings.
Oh, okay.
Someone that's older than I will have to tell me because I have not found a label for them, so I don't know. I got them. I inherited those from quite a few elderly ladies who retired from canning. So
Dorothy says they're Bama jars.
Bama jars.
So we'll have to.
I'll look and see if that's the similar because it's. Let me try to put it. There we go. The screen.
Bama jelly jars. Yeah, there we go. Okay.
I've had different ones, but this particular set was different than what I grew up with. Bama jelly. Wonderful. Thank you. That is going on my
Of
research.
course, Dorothy knew the answer.
You know, I have like a dozen or more of these too. But yeah, lemonade. There we go.
Do you, before we kind of dive in, do you have like a favorite drink to can or preserve, or something that you like to make in ball jars or canning jars?
I can so much. Probably, I haven't made any drinks other than my favorite juice to put in a jar.
Mm.
There are muscadine grape juice.
Huh.
Okay, thanks to my grandmother-in-law from Arkansas, and I was pregnant with the last two children, and I flew through her muscadine jelly and her grape juice. So that became the one thing. Yeah.
Yeah, you never quite know what you're gonna crave. I have a friend that makes me kombucha and brings them to me in ball jars, and I have a very soft spot in my heart for
My
that.
daughter would love you with that. She makes kombucha.
Yeah. So I always want to start with full disclosure. Like, I come from a family of canners. My dad does metal cans for a living. So for the time I was like, I'm not that tall, but from the time I was real short, I've been on jar filling duty or smashing the cranberry duty when I wasn't old enough to touch the hot liquid. And I still can today. I brought along a picture of, the one on the left is my kitchen after peach season last year, after my parents sent me jar lids, because that was hard to find last year. And on the right is from an exhibit that we had on canning quite a few years ago. And I just thought it was really beautiful, all the jars next to each other. But my question for you, LaDonna, is how did you get into canning, and how have you continued that tradition?
Now, I come from a family of canners, okay, but my mother was not. That generation skipped. My grandmother grew up in the Great Depression on a small farm in Wentzville, St. Charles County, Missouri. So middle of the north part of the state. And her mother and had a small orchard. And not only did they can, they also made that moonshine that they also put in the mason jars. And so that's what started me, is growing up with my grandmother. And by the time I come along, she wasn't really pressure canning as much. She was really doing a lot of water bath canning. And over the years, it just seemed like no one else in the family was doing it but her. And I would do it occasionally. And then as I got older and had my own family, I started pressure canning as well. Because I just can't remember. I might have been just way too small to remember when she was pressure canning more fully, but definitely, she had a cellar full of everything pretty, and it was spooky to go down there for a jar of jelly, but you did it because you wanted that jar of jelly, so that's how I got started, was through my grandmother, who was come from a long line of preserving their foods that way, but not my mom, not her siblings.
I wonder why. Do you have an idea of like why that didn't transcend generations?
It's the only thing I can think of is they also don't garden.
Oh, okay.
It was a house, it was 11 children in that home, 3 boys, the rest girls, and not one of them does really garden. My mom a little bit, but not enough that you would, need to can. And it just, none of them, they just skipped them. So I picked it up and ran with it because grandma taught me. I was my grandma's shadow. This is what my grandmother looked like. She's gone now, but this is what she looked like. I'm her spit image. And then I taught my daughter as well. And who's teaching? Friends. So we're passing it. I
feel like I've done that when it's season, and I don't have a big garden, but I do a community agriculture. And when the tomatoes come in, and I've taught a bunch of my friends who are in that, like, how do you can tomatoes, which is not hard, but it's
one of the easiest ones to start with if you were not familiar with canning.
Yeah. So keeping with that idea of our like ancestors here in the Midwest, today, if I go to the grocery store, I can find the cucumbers and the strawberries and whatever pretty much all year round. But that wasn't always the case for most of Indiana's history or the Midwestern history. So why was canning so important, and what role did it fill?
my goodness, so important in so many ways, and maybe slightly different for every generation, but it all comes down to preserving that food, giving some food security, and extending your garden fruits and vegetables throughout the year. And if they do canned meat, your butchering season as well, it's sad to say. But there was a need. Food is perishable. So if there was a way to maintain that harvest, not just for your dinner plate tonight, but maybe during winter times when you can't grow anything, that right there is your fundamental need, is just food security.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. So do you think that also improved nutritional health of people kind of living on the frontier?
Definitely, because think about it. If you can harvest, some vegetables today, some green beans, for instance, and once we, properly can that, though that nutrition is there, it's not going to dissipate right away. It's gonna hold out. And to me, it's even better than freezing sometimes, depending on what you're freezing in, right? But that canning jar, you pop it open in the middle of winter and you just smell it. It just smells natural. It smells good. It smells wholesome. But you definitely can see the nutritional value with just using that for canning.
So if we're going to step back, let's pretend it's 1850, 1860. How would I go about canning at that time?
Definitely, you would have been taught by your mother or, the neighbor lady, somebody, very well versed in it would have definitely helped you along, and you would have learned. So it would not have been taught necessarily in school. Okay. So you would have learned, standing right there beside grandma, like I did. And in those earlier time periods, say those 1850s and 60s, you would have probably done it over fire. Okay. Put that stock pot right over our fire and did some water bath canning. And it would have been definitely easier to do that using simple foods, tomatoes that have a nice high acidity that could, that's not going to harm you later if it wasn't done properly, versus meat. Okay, meat is not something we would normally do that over water bath canner. We're going to do that in a pressure canner. And they found that out. They did find that out. So you definitely would have started over fire with a nice water bath canner full of water, nice, good, sturdy jars. Those jars would have had some nice, good rubber seals. And back in those earlier days, it would have been a tin type of lid.
Ooh, I think I have a picture of one of those.
Yeah, pull it out. And if not,
yeah, there we go. So I think these would be like that tin lid, right? That would kind of just screw down on.
And
yeah.
let me see here. Make sure I can see myself here. Okay, there we go. Right here. That's exactly what's inside of that.
Okay. Was that picture? Yeah. I want to
yeah.
make sure you're big so we can see you. Yeah.
There we go. And also, I have like a couple cases of these. Okay, I'm not going to use them, but it probably would be neat to try to do that just to see how well they held up. But it's a nice rubber ring. Oh, in front of me. There we go. Disappeared on me. But very interesting. And the inside is in this particular one, has some are like a plastic, but this one is a glass lid that would sit inside of there, and then this rubber seal would go on top. So isn't that cool? I just can't part with these. They're just so cool. And then they'll go on top of your nice, good, sturdy jars. These, I think, came on some of those nice older blue ones.
Yeah, so jars weren't always clear like my the one I'm drinking here.
Glass does go through different things, and ironically, you might have grown up in the canning community. I grew up beside a glass factory. So I understood that color range of glass, firsthand, playing with them and throwing the little pellets that would fall off, when they move things around into the Mississippi River.
So I'm going to bring that picture back up because I think this is an ad from 1912 from the Ball company, and shout out to Minnetrista, which is a museum up in Muncie, Indiana, kind of in the home of Ball, for having collected a lot of this Ball history. But these show a whole bunch of different types of cans. So, and almost a little bit of the evolution of how the cans go. So we talked about these guys with that like gasket. Can you talk a little bit about like how these would can as they come along, these ones with the little metal?
Right, they're like a middle thing, and there's so much show and tell I could have brought in here, but because I'm sorry, I have inherited so many jars, not from just my family, but from older ladies that I will go to their estate sales. They're no longer able to can, and they're locally, most of their children don't can. So I've inherited a lot. So what you see behind me is part of my canning shed. And I have some of those there, and it's a glass jar, of course, and that cap at the top is also glass. And it would also have a seal, okay, like that rubber seal I showed you, but there's a metal band that would clip and pop over the top of that glass, and then you would use that as a in your canner, your water bath canner, and can that way as well. I've actually not had the guts to actually use those.
I was going to ask you, how do you make sure you get a good seal on that? Because one of the things about canning, in order to prevent things from growing inside, one way to do that is to make sure you have a clean, good seal. So you know how you'd get that on those?
On those, it has to do with the tightening of those metal bands that are around. It's a nice, thick, sturdy wire of steel, and you would have to adjust it, because I've had to fight with it or have my husband adjust it before when I've used it for stuff that's just going in the fridge or something pretty on the counter. But to use it for canning, they would have made sure that slide in there really well. And the very top of that glass disc on the top, that lid has a groove in it. So it kind of helped it reside in there and not slip off. Very, really, really neat little invention, honestly, when you wanted something that was reusable, because rubber seals are not necessarily reusable.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I did pull, this is a picture of Mr. Mason. You ask why we might call them mason jars sometimes. Mr. Mason actually patented the first lid for a jar. So this, I think, was in the 1850s, and it sort of changed the game for canning, right? In your ability
definitely.
to do that.
I was gonna say, there's so many different varieties of evolution, that I think that's what really intrigued me to start accidentally collecting jars. But I actually I do not use the metal ones for canning in my pressure canner, and that just because, I only have so many and I don't want to ruin them. But think about it, if you could just use a piece of glass and get that tightened down, because if some people, if they're not canning, they might be fermenting, and you can use that as well, and then just burp it occasionally. So you wouldn't have to worry about a type of seal on it. And other times, if they didn't have a rubber seal and that glass did meet very well, they might attempt to use it that way as well. So really interesting how they evolve from some, cork and wax to rubber and steel and tin, and, and using glass that's able to handle the pressurizing and the heat.
So let's kind of talk about that glass, because I would be remiss, we're in Indiana, if we don't bring up the Ball brothers, and they started manufacturing glass in about 1884. So how did that company change the game?
They really stepped it up. And in my opinion, how they did it is I know originally they did incorporate another glass factory when they, took this on, or I'm sorry, canning company, grown up by a glass factory. And that probably really helped them see how things were. And they were already several of the brothers, of my understanding was they were already involved with that particular company that they had took over in Muncie. So, in Buffalo. So when they were, revamping and looking at how they can make things a little bit better and more assurity, in the innovations, that right there really changed the game, because that was their focus. And there were 5 brothers. Can you imagine the brain power behind that? 5 brothers sitting there thinking, how can we do this better? And their wives were like, hey, I need it to work this way. This is how I envision history. I needed to work this way, and it needs to be better, because I had 5 jars that did not work, and I slaved over those tomatoes and they went bad and they spoiled. So whenever they really got into the invention, how they can make their product better and stand out against any growing competition, Okay, that's what made it easier for home canners. And then they tried, and the better they got, the more affordable the jars became. Okay, and the equipment to come around it. They made it affordable. They gave you the tools to be able to can, and that made it so much easier. And I think that's what really, in my opinion, stepped the game up for the Ball brothers.
Yeah, and as I understand it, I think that they then make glass jars really accessible. So you've got that lid that Mr. Mason invented. You've got these jars that are accessible, and then it sort of takes off.
And it took off. I mean, if supply and demand, once someone caught on, and think how the newspapers are running. It's, if you ever get a chance to look through some older newspapers, a lot are digitized online, Library of Congress, you can go back and just see the advertising. And on top of the advertising, you had articles that would help push you to like, hey, you know, you can these items that you're growing and don't be wasteful, you know. And so those Ball brothers took advantage of that. They really looked at the market. I really think they did a fabulous job of getting all of us, because here we are still using Ball jars.
Right. The Ball company might not make the Ball jars anymore, but it's still got their name on it. Yeah. Was an interesting tidbit when we did our exhibit. I found out that the Ball company makes more aluminum cans than they do glass jars, and somebody else makes these now.
Yeah,
So
I forget the name of that particular company. I always have to look that one up.
yeah, I think it's like, it is something like Fresh Preserving or something like that. And they,
Like, okay, and the company behind it. But it is interesting that they did, you know, obtain all of the, you know, Ball markings and left it, because that's just too good of a deal that you wouldn't want to lose your, what do you call it? Your following, because I love the older Ball jars. They're
right.
wonderful.
So let's maybe talk about the process of canning and how you might have done that, because food and science have changed over the last century. I will caveat before we get into this question that there is, though a lot of what LaDonna is going to talk about is the same, there's a few pieces that scientifically we've changed to make sure that you're canning safely. Like, we don't want you to can something that has botulism in it or something like that and give it to your friends. So I think Marianne's already put it in the chat, but we'll drop the link again to the National Center for Home Food Preservation. Just make sure you're following their suggestions on how much acid to put in, how long to water bath can something, or how long to pressure can something. That way, we're keeping everybody safe. I always feel like I'm a child of food scientists. I have to give that safety moment.
You know, but you know, we have so many people that were new to this last year during the crisis. And one, they had to learn, and then you also have to feel safe to use the product and know that they're safe.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know that? How did we can it before? Well, a lot of it in the earlier years was trial and error. And sadly, the error means not just tummy upset, but you could actually really harm someone. So over time, they really started to try to improve not just the technique of methods, but also by the food types that we're using. So for instance, tomatoes, okay, they're very acidic, they're easy to can. I always suggest that just because it has a higher acid content. Back in the day, heirloom tomatoes, still, many of those still hold those higher acid content. So if we were to can and put that in a water bath canner, crush all your tomatoes down, okay, get that juice, or me, I do it all whole. I just crush it all and put it all whole, skin and all. And then once we're tighten those lids up, pop that inside that hot water bath, that bath is coming up to a particular temperature. Back then it was boil it very high for about, I think grandma had us doing it for like 10 minutes. Okay, and then pop it in. Today we can look at a little bit more easier. We have more temperature gauges, you know, I have an actual push button heat sensor, you know, one of those little things, instead of having to always put in my little thermometer in the water. But you didn't always have that back then. And so they would make sure that they got it as hot as they could. Okay, got that water boiling, pop that, you know, prepared food inside that jar down inside that pot, and then it would maybe go for about 10 or 15 minutes, okay, and pull it out. today, the difference is the food is different than what we were raising before. Okay. They need the food to travel. They need it to travel, and acidic food doesn't travel well. It ripens very nice. It gives great flavor, but that does not make it look pretty by the time it gets to your local grocery store. And so those tomatoes that were heirloom are no longer necessarily heirlooms in the varieties that we're getting from the store. So if you were to can today, the same way those tomatoes today, in the same process as prior years, they might not hold up, and you will have a bad jar. You will have botulism or moldiness usually is a sign. And so there's some things so there are differences, and you have to know an older recipe from 1910 may not equate to a recipe today, because the jars are changing, but also our food is changing. So that's where you're going to want to use these new recommendations and follow to make sure that you're not going to hurt yourself.
So I was going to say, I saw in the comments, and we have someone that was taught to do hot fill and hold. So like get your fill up to a specific temperature, hold it for 3 minutes, and then put it into the jar. Do you know when that recommendation might have changed to sort of the put it in the can and make sure that you hold it in the water for a certain time?
Well, I can't say I know exactly like a year that would have changed, okay? Because throughout the country, you've got different people doing a little bit different stuff. And I learned one way, like I said, boil it 10 minutes. We got that water boiling. You knew it was up to temp if it held that long at that particular steady boil. But I had grandmother who'd been doing it for 70 something years, right? And but not sure about the time, but definitely that hold it. I don't know. It'll be interesting to go back and look at the date. I'll have to put that down in my notes and look and see when I might see the change. But a lot of newspapers were really great at spreading changes, even those earlier years. I don't want to call it the ladies section, but like if they had the home cooking section inside of the older newspapers, sometimes those are helpful to try to see when some of the things have changed. So that would be interesting to go back and check.
So I know that like I learned from my mom, you learned from your grandmother, but who else was teaching people how to can?
You had a lot of organizations like the goodness, right off the top of my head, the local
Extension services.
There you go.
Sorry.
I tell you, my brain is just a little off today. A lot of local extension companies were services and departments were going into communities to try to assist those to not just do proper canning, but also to make sure that they're storing it right and things like that, having the right equipment. So educating really went well, and you really see a lot of that. After the Great Depression, you see a lot more extension items also. And that's where I really do go back and look inside of the newspapers to look at accounts and a lot of government records where they made reports, because those individuals had to, make a report, send that back to their heads and know which communities they did. They did a lot of programs where they invited, ladies of the home and other individuals to come forward. And then you had schools that they would, try to, in later years, go ahead and try to get them involved to do it properly as well. So a very big community push. I wish that we still did things like that way. We kind of do, but it's more of you have to initiate it on your own to go to some of these extensions, versus back then they would actually come into the communities a lot more than what we see. But it was very useful because my grandmother and them probably learned it that way, I think, that someone came in and showed them how to do it and change with the times. So very interesting how education played a big role.
And I will put I'll put a plug in for a few things. There is still a master preserver organization here in Indiana. It's run out of Purdue. All the extension services come from our land grant universities. That's Purdue here. So you can go and take a class and become a master preserver and know how to can and teach others how to can. We have this awesome collection about Indiana's home extension services at the Indiana Historical Society. It's called the Who's Your Homemaker collection. And what I love about it is it's extension service members interviewing other extension service members about their life on the farm, how they learned things, when did they get a refrigerator, how did they do these things? And so it's an amazing way to know how life here changed and what changed around you. The other one that I always like to plug is there's an organization here in Indianapolis called Flanner House. Flanner House worked with the African American community, and part of their mission by the time you get to kind of the late 40s, early 50s is about self-sufficiency. So they opened up a cannery in just kind of north of downtown Indianapolis. I think at that time it's somewhere between 16th and 21st Streets, kind of along what's now called MLK or Michigan Road. And the idea was you would have a garden at home, and then you'd bring your produce and they would teach you how to can. So we have some amazing color photos. I don't get to see much in color of like the community canning, and then you'd have them for the rest of the year and teaching people who never knew how to can. I got to learn about it for a project we did with Flanner House in their orchard, and I just love them so much. So sorry.
That's beautiful, because that's basically that same concept that they would do in those earlier years, especially when you started seeing communities that didn't always have all the conveniences like electricity. Okay. You get around the 1920s, you finally start seeing some little communities getting electricity, but it took a long time, so in fresh running water, that type of thing, everything just played a role. So I know we're talking about canning, but it was so many different components that had to come along to help communities advance themselves. And food, that's our number one need, food and water. So this right here, that community, that's a wonderful thing. I wish we had something similar like that here in Missouri, this part of the Midwest. But we do have extension office. We do have programs that still do that same thing as well. And other communities around the country do it too. So if it's something that you don't have someone like my grandmother to start teaching you, and then I, teaching my daughter how to actually move into pressure canning, then the extensions are wonderful. They're wonderful. If they don't cost you, if they cost you anything, it's very little. It's a really great investment. And, if you really go gung ho and become a master in it, okay.
I will say more recently, I went to a canning class from a master preserver who kind of just became obsessed and went through it. And so that's sort of how I kind of honed my skills, was through. So sometimes there are classes around, and
you definitely take advantage of it.
I think the other way that people learned the can would be from this is the new ball canning book, but it's real big now. It used to be thinner.
It was thinner, and I had an older one. I think that one might have been in this 50s or 60s, the one that I had, but it disappeared, and the daughter's been here a little bit. So it's gone. It's not on the shelf, which means she came and got it. What I fell in love with, and along the lines of community, okay, and how they do it, because I think I saw someone pop about cookbooks. Well, okay, here we go. I'm trying to find, I'm gonna have to get a better back one. Is this one here was farm journals, freezing canning. If you're here and you are a child of like the 50s and 60s, the farm journal. Okay, I had to stumble across it, and funny story. A lot of the recipes that my grandmother-in-law had, and some of my grandmothers, I didn't realize this whole time, were from farm journals. And it was a magazine, and it was community led, but they also tested things and made sure that they were trying to get everyone in the community that read their magazine were canning specifically, and it changed with the times. So they made several versions of this book, and it's a nice thick book. I found another one for my daughter, and ironically, very little has changed on the times and things that we've used to today. I'm starting to finally see some of the timing changing for some things like jelly. They want you to boil it extra now. I'm like, really? That makes it so hard. But this right here was wonderful. So whenever I found some pieces of paper written down from one of the older family members or my in-laws family members, I realized they tore it out of a farmer's journal or farm journals magazine. So if you stumble across those, just like I said, heed a warning, compare it to the current ball and see if the timing's still set the same. If it is, you're good to go. If not, there's usually, ball usually is really good at telling you how to make an adjustment on like certain foods, especially online. And I know some of the extension offices online keep some of that updated as well, depending on where you're at in the country. But this right here, besides the ball book, which has disappeared, and the daughter actually goes by her current. She also has the new.
I'll hold this one up. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say the version right before that one she uses a lot. This one I end up falling back to because this one were the recipes that I grew up doing. So that's where I lean to. And what I did with another book like this is I went and I wrote in notes. So if I changed the time, I wrote in my book. And and then I just had a spare book of this and I gave it to my daughter so she knew where my original recipes came from. And then if it was something similar. So like great grandma in-laws dill pickles came out of the farm journal that whole time.
I was going to ask if you have a favorite recipe that you remember from the past tasting different than what we're kind of
apple butter.
Apple butter? Oh, okay.
Apple butter today is not the same.
What's different?
I think it might be the longer cooking time changes it slightly. I think this is my opinion. The amount of seasonings is not the same. And then the mix of seasonings. I don't know. It's just a little different than some of those older recipes that I have played with. And I make a killer apple butter. I'm just going to let you know. My mail lady loved it. Okay.
I'm going to keep that in mind when I come to visit.
You might want to try my apple butter.
So we're going to kind of transition to your questions. So if you have any, feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A. I know Dolly wants to know, she thought that you were actually sitting in the canning shed.
Yeah,
and the internet doesn't reach there, but can you tell us about the canning shed and how you set it up? And
yeah, let me see if I can move over a second because I got my big head in the way. Oh, there we go. Okay. I don't know which way I'm going. There we go. Okay. Literally, this is this is just a shed, nothing special, nothing pretty. Okay. There's nothing fancy about this. It's not paint at all. My cabinets all need painting, but it's a working shed. It started out as when we bought our farm. I live on about 20 acres in southeast Missouri, just a few minutes from the Mississippi River. Not enough to flood though. And we moved out here. So we're far enough from town, about a half hour from any direction, from any city. And once we get out here, sometimes we get snowed in. I was already in the mindset for stocking up, but I really started canning a lot more. I have 3 grown children now, but 2 of them are boys, and I have a really large husband, truck driver, and I just got tired of always shopping. So I got really, really deep into canning. And then every time we went to an estate sale or a yard sale or an auction, I would buy the canning jars when no one really cared to do it. I started also seeing when someone sadly would pass away and their children did not pick up canning, okay, at all. So I have wonderfully inherited from a lot of beautiful women who are no longer here. Great jars, didn't have chips on them. And so I took over my husband's tool shed, pulled everything out one day when he wasn't home. And I started putting things in here and they were all in boxes. And I'm gonna scoot over a little more here. Okay, well, nope, I can't get out of that at all. And they were all in boxes. And eventually the shed, started filling up a little more than I thought. And over the years, I've tried to make it more reachable to all the jars. This is not everything I have. You guys, I've never shown this to anyone. So, okay, I'm a prepper, don't tell anybody. So I don't show my gear, but I really wanted to brag because I have a wonderful collection. And after last year's events, I really saw how this is so needed. I've actually given some people a couple jars. My daughter had her stash in here, but after last year, she took all of her stash home. So right here, I've got, there we go, optical illusion. On the 3 cabinets you see, I actually have 4 cabinets in this shed right now. I have a couple more that I have to figure out how to fit in here. I've been trying to get all the jars out of boxes because they harbor spiders and things. And yeah, I'm tired of that. So I've been trying to get the quart jars, and a lot of them in these two far blue and that other one's green cabinets are tons of curves and balls, masons, anchor hocking. I can't think this another one. It starts with a B. I at least have to read the box name. I have so many different types, things that I never even knew existed, companies that are long gone, different shapes, different years, and it's been beautiful. So there are quite a few jars deep and tall in each cabinet. On the very far right there are some more shelves where I've got jelly jars, which are hard to come by lately. And I forgot I even had some in that back corner until I went cleaning this up so you guys can have a picture of my shed. So thank you, made me do my cleaning. And then I have on the right or left for you guys, I started after last year's, mess and pulling everything, I started making it to where these jars here will be put and organized into something other than box. So if you can do something like that, preserve your jars. So that way each jar is bottom down, nothing's topping them, nothing's chipping them. Because once they're chipped, you cannot reuse the jar. I don't care what type of glue you think you're putting on it. It's not worth your time, effort, money, food. Don't reuse the jar. I'll come after you. And then what you can't really see down below on the bottom left are still boxes in progress that need to be gone through, because every time I've been given boxes of jars, they're like, oh, I've got canning jars. And a lot of times they might just be store jars that are not useful for home canning. They're either too thin. We don't have that type of equipment to do that. And so just a lot. And I've got every variety size you can think of. It's been a luxury. And then of course I have a hoard of rings and seals that don't, I got some rings outside, but most of the time the rings and seals I keep in the house. But that's what's going on in this shed. But it's actually my shed. I'm not lying to you. This is, and it's just functioning shed. So it's not, picture perfect, but it's a to die for, because I have a girlfriend who also lives up the road, and she's like, I would love to just fall in there. But there's a lot of wonderful history in a lot of these jars that I just can't imagine it. Oh, thank you, Dorothy. I seen it pop up. Lovely. Thank you so much. I cleaned it for everyone. It was not that pretty because I do let the cats go and sleep in here. What I didn't tell you is where it's a little light up here, that side of the shed I turned into a greenhouse on the other outside of that.
So how much do you can a year then? I feel like that has to be a question.
I did not count jars last year because I lost count and I gave up, and I have not. I know I did like 140 jars of green beans last year alone. A little short of that, corn, jellies, tomatoes.
And those she has to pressure can, so you can't go through them nearly as fast because
yeah, I pressure canned so many tomatoes from my garden and the local farm store, or if the store had a sale on good tomatoes, and I canned those, and then I got into canning meat. So makes really good pulled pork.
As we said, make sure that you pressure can that and don't try to water bath can that, because water bath canning's for acidic things.
For acidic foods like vegetables that are acidic, not corn. That was pressure canned. Green beans were pressure canned. Tomatoes were water bathed. And I heirloom tomatoes only, other than those few I got from the store, and I mixed them in. And then when I have a doubt on the acidity level, I add in more vinegar.
So Dorothy wanted to know, are all the lid sizes still the same for your heritage cans kind of going forward?
That's a good question. And when I found out that that's not last year, I dug deeper into my canning stash, because I don't know how many things I've canned last year. What is that? 300 vegetables alone. Okay. So I started getting into jars that I had never messed with. They just been sitting in a box. And what I did notice is some of the current ball bands, I say current, the last 20 years worth of bands may not fit as tightly on some of the newer jars. Okay, the newer jars, because I started having gaps, and when you put that down in that water bath, you see it bubble up, and then I started having tomatoes floating around my water bath, and nothing's going to seal that way ever. And I had to pull it back out, clean the jar, completely redo it. I also had that problem with some of the newer jelly jars, and started noticing that as well. I had jelly floating in my water. That's not good.
I didn't realize that they were I just assumed like the old jars you might have from like the 30s.
I have a problem with the newer jars more than the older jars. And the other difference is the older jars are thicker glass, so they have a thicker rim, and they're literally wider, okay, on the rim. The newer jars have a thinner rim, and the jars themselves are thinner.
So if you're trying to get the wax seal with how we do the lids today, that could be.
Yeah.
So we're getting closer to the end of time, but I do want to ask, what's your favorite thing to can?
For water bath, jelly.
Okay. Which kind of jelly? Like, what are we talking here?
Lately, this week it's going to be blackberry jelly. It's blackberry chicken, and if you ever came across my Facebook page, my grandbaby is eating the blackberries as soon as we pull them out of and put them in the basket. I'm like, I can't make jelly this week, but blackberries are in season. And as far as pressure canning, it used to be green beans, but after last year's, really trusting myself to can meats, which is a whole different thing. You really need to make sure you understand meat. That's been the newer thing. And yeah, so being on a farm where I do raise animals, and we do have our own processing here, that's a big thing for me, because 2 years ago, I lost a lot of meat out of the freezer because we went on vacation and came back and the freezer door popped open.
Oh, there went all of it. Yeah.
lost all the meat in that freezer. So there's another reason why canning is so important, because freezers can't keep that stuff for a year, even though we want it to. the way a canning jar could, done properly. But those are my two favorite things.
So we had a question of, do you ever can with the paraffin wax melted on top to seal before the lid goes on?
I have not done that, only because since things have changed so much, I just feel a little more uncomfortable doing it. But now that I do more reenacting, I'm actually wanting to go back through and show those techniques, not necessarily to eat that food that's in there, but just to show how it was done. The other thing that's a little different, and I'll put on that part, is the Tatler company is wonderful. They had sent me quite a few years ago some samples to do, because I was teaching a few people how to can online. And it's a replacement for like that glass piece, but it's a plastic type style reusable lid, and they have a rubber ring seal. So I did actually do quite a bit of that as well. And I have those in my house prepper cabinet. So quite different.
I was gonna say, we talk about Kerr jars. Mr. Kerr is the one that invented what we use today, the metal piece with wax built in that goes with the screw top on top. And so I think that's invented right after World War II, and it becomes the dominant thing that you see with canning. So I think we can leave the paraffin behind. What can you repeat the company that had the glass jars?
TATTLER.com. Oh, for the new lids?
Yeah, then the one that they sent you.
Yeah, it's Tatler, and Tatler.com, TATTLER, and they're reusable. There is a learning curve, and they had two types. A newer type is a little bit easier to use. I have some of both, but it was replacing you know, how everybody, we're still in a shortage for lids. And so I had a nice good stash of like 200 of these tattlers. They sent me a few to test, and I also purchased quite a bit. And it uses a rubber seal similar to what was always used in the past. So instead of that that metal, you know, that we use today with that little bit of glue on top, it actually used that plastic tab and top on there. Lid. Goodness. I can't get tongue-tied today.
Well, this has been great. I really appreciate you taking the time, LaDonna, to talk to us today about canning. If you enjoyed LaDonna and you want to hear more about her vast wealth of knowledge, come see us on August 11th. Part of our what we call Midwestern Roots Light, our biannual genealogy conference, is gone a little virtual this year, and then we'll do the full thing next year. So LaDonna is going to talk about reconstructing rural communities. So come join us. You can find out how to register for that at indianahistory.org. And I've enjoyed this so much. Thank you so much for chatting with us. I'll shoot it back over to Marianne. You're muted. There we go.
There you go.
I'm getting there. All right. Thank you so much, LaDonna and Callie, both, for this great conversation. I can't wait to learn how to preserve and can. I just started gardening last summer with the pandemic, and so I think I'm gonna have a lot of cucumbers this year. So.
She's coming down the street so I can help her can. That's really what's going to happen here.
I gotta learn how to pickle.
You know what? Last year I had so many zucchini and I did not have one cucumber. I ended up making bread and butter pickles with that. So you got to use what you got and take advantage of it.
Got a huge zucchini.
Well, I've always wanted to try pickled watermelon rinds because I know people used to do that. No.
I love pickles. I don't like cucumbers, but you pickle it, I'm on it.
Okay.
Not the rind. That was not me. But I do want something I've not done, pickled eggs.
Okay. Oh, I love pickled eggs.
And right now I'm running, I have an overload of eggs. So that's my new adventure. Every year, canning is wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Canning is wonderful. And there's always something new, no matter how long you've been doing this.
Right. Well, all right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. If you enjoyed this program, we hope you'll consider coming back for more. As I mentioned up at the top, we have more history happy hours coming soon. Join us on August 19th for a conversation on women's professional baseball, and stay tuned for more upcoming conversations again on historic murders, native beadwork, and Indiana ghosts, all coming soon. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Historic murders. That one got me. And the beat, that one got me. Yeah. I'm sorry. And I would love to answer more questions with anybody. So just one more plug real quick, because so many people love canning. I do have a prepper page on YouTube, and I'm getting back into that. It's called Sustainable Prepper. You can find me there.
We will send you an email tomorrow, and we'll make sure to include the link to that in that email.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm taking your talk.
Have a good one. Thank you all for having me. This has been so much fun.
Yeah, it's great. All right. Thank you everyone so much. If you want to sign up for more programs, you can do that through our website, indianahistory.org. Visit our calendar and sign up for more. And then we'll post this conversation to our YouTube channel and our website in the upcoming weeks. And you can look for more coming soon. If you missed your chance to donate or would like to make a further gift to support the Indiana Historical Society, please visit indianahistory.org. Kelly will drop that link into the chat. Your donation allows us to continue to share Hoosier stories. You'll get an email again from us tomorrow morning with all these extra links and the survey included. Thank you. Stay safe and healthy, and we can't wait to see you in the future.